Cool. Well, welcome to Star Wars Day, Tuesday, May the 4th.
Can I tell you something?
Yes.
So this morning I was in English with Mr. Grant,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, "Make the 4th be with you."
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, I have a shirt that says "May the Forest be with you."
Ah,
I've been saving this, and I haven't. Yeah, so I was really excited to finally get to wear it today.
if I had been thinking, I would have worn my Star Wars shirt too.
Well, you can always, you can pretend. We can't tell. Maybe that's what you have.
It's also great.
Yeah. So welcome back to those of you that have been here. Today's guest speaker is Maurice, and I will let him introduce himself and just a few housekeeping things like we always say. If you will kind of have the conversation that we'll have, and he'll share some things with us. And then if you have questions, feel free to, as always, write them and put them in the chat, or write them down for yourself and save them. We'll probably pause at about like 4:25 or so and make sure that we leave time for people to have questions. We'll go till maybe 4:30, 4:45 and just kind of see how things flow, see where the conversation goes, and then we will just see how the day goes. And so I'll let you introduce yourself if you want to, and then I'll jump right into all of the personal questions about how we can solve the world's problems. So
my name is Maurice Cowley. I am born and raised in Well, I wasn't born here, sorry, but I was raised in Portland from the time I was about 1. So I consider myself a native. I write poetry. I work with young people and have had various titles. I'm a coach, a teacher, a freshman English, which is the greatest subject ever to exist. And currently I work on staff at a church in Portland, working with young people. And so I have what do I have? 5 children of my own and a little granddaughter and 2 dogs and 7 chickens. So our house has been very, very full during COVID. I don't know. That's like me in a very small nutshell.
Okay. I'm sure we will learn more as we go along.
Let's hope.
So let's see. I will jump right in with the first fun question that I like to ask.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a superpower, what would it be and why?
Yeah. That is a very, very great question. If I had a superpower, I think that I would want to be able to fly. I like going to new places, and so like the ability to travel would be pretty amazing. And I think that when I was little, I always had this dream of I really wanted to sleep on top of the clouds. Oh hey, I see you. That's my dog. And so it'd be fun if I could fly. I would just go sleep on the clouds all the time. It'd be fun.
Cool. That would be really fun.
Yeah,
I wonder. I don't know the answer to this. I wonder if what the temperature is like up there. You'd have to take some blankets.
Can only assume that it's cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks cold, but
but comfortable.
Yeah. And so kind of the other thing, so the theme of these groups is the idea of it's okay not to be okay. And we always ask people kind of to share anything that they have used or would want to offer to young people in the interest of acknowledging that. So we'll dive into that in a little bit, but I'm curious, how would you define the word resilience?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? And especially in young people as well.
Yeah, I think to me, it is largely just the ability to keep going. Life is rarely easy. And I think it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, what your circumstance is. There are things about being alive that are challenging. And so resilience, I think, to me is just the ability to face the things that are hard and to keep going in spite of them. Just this idea that something will always trip us up, and we have the opportunity to either get back up or to stay down and not do anything about it. And I think even in an image like that, there's a lot that goes into what does it mean to get back up and what does it mean to be tripped up. And But I think that just the effort to say, okay, I'm going to keep on for another 1 hour. I'm going to keep on for another 5 minutes, like whatever that like smallest increment of success that you feel like you can manage, like it's just to do that, right? Even if it's 1 second, I kept going for one more second, for the next second. And that's really resiliency. It's more about the process of continuing rather than any arrival at any destination.
Yeah, I have leaned a lot on like the wisdom of Disney over the last year. And one of my favorite things is like just keep swimming and do the next right thing. So Finding Nemo and Frozen. And I think I've learned that like maybe there were bigger lessons in those movies than I imagined. But it's true, because I think the last year we've all had things not go the way we expected, at least twice, usually twice a day at least. And so those things, I've leaned on those a lot. And so thinking about like you personally in the last year, like tell us what you've learned about yourself through everything that the last year has brought.
I didn't learn this first thing. I knew it, but I love being around people. Like I'm an extrovert, and anytime I can be with people, I get so much energy and joy. And so this last little while has actually been really challenging in that sense, that it's actually more difficult to be around people. But I think the thing that I have learned is that being able to redefine and really like find joy in what I can do rather than like focus on the stuff that I can't. Like the first 6 months would have been brutal if it was just like if I had spent all of my time moping about how I couldn't see my friends anymore and we couldn't go do X, Y, and Z, but instead, trying to like, well, being on Zoom or Google, that's like a shallow replacement, but it's the best I can do. And so I'm going to find joy in that. I think I've learned that I can do that I can really embrace joy, even in the middle of hard things. And I learned that I have to work out just about every day or else I might die. Because that's like this other, like if I'm inside my house all the time, it's not very pleasant. So whatever it is I can do to be outside, like walking the dog, running, whatever, it's very necessary. And I don't think I realized quite how true that was when leaving the house every day was very normal. Like even just, like driving to work, that was a normal thing. And it's once I couldn't do that anymore, that like the need to leave became so much more apparent. Because if I can leave, then I can embrace the joy of being here still.
So like learning to appreciate the little things that you didn't know were the little things, it sounds like.
For sure.
Yeah. You mentioned like finding joy. If you wanted to explain to somebody how they could start finding joy amidst this, how would you recommend they do that?
I think one thing that I will really say is I feel like the temptation, because I'm also like, I'm an extrovert and I'm an optimist. And for a long time for me, the temptation was to say, I'm going to totally ignore the things that are terrible and focus instead on the things that are good. And I think actually the first step for me in finding joy is I've learned that it is acknowledging the thing that is not joyful. Like I get to acknowledge that this particular circumstance we're in is less than ideal. It's not pleasant, that it has all of its like terrible things that come with it. And in the face of that, I can say, okay, that's true. And what else is true? Like, what is the thing that can make me smile even right now? Like, what dumb little joke made me laugh? What of my daily routines and rituals that I really enjoy, like how can I find enjoyment in that? If it's like that first sip of coffee, if it's a hug from my youngest son, if it's like I don't know, the way the sun looks on that particular day. I have learned to be a person who notices what's crappy, and as I'm sitting with that, willing to look around and try to find what is beautiful and like to take delight and joy in what's beautiful.
Yeah. It's almost as if all of the cliches they always told us have some truth in them. Like, don't forget to smell the roses. It's like, oh, I guess that's not just a thing we say. It's
Yeah. And,
so Disney movies and cliches.
It's really bizarre because the cliches are kind of true, and when we forget to, when they get really dangerous is when we forget to acknowledge the part that comes first, right? Like the cliche about like after the storm comes a rainbow. Like it's true, and if we're using it dismissively about the storm, we're kind of like, it invalidates my experience. And if I'm not ready to be looking for rainbows, then then it doesn't feel good to me. But as I'm learning, the more I've lived, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna like fully acknowledge that this storm is here and it's not pleasant, and this other part of that cliche is true too.
Yeah, and I feel like right now we're in this interesting space where like some people are ready for the rainbows and some people are terrified of even going outside because the storm was so big. And we're all kind of in that same, we're all doing that at the same time. And so what advice would you give to maybe a young person who doesn't really feel ready for the rainbows, but knows that the storm is coming to an end, and like maybe is experiencing anxiety? Maybe they're labeling it that, maybe they're not, but like something feels off and they are terrified.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think to take that something feels off and be ready to sit with that until until I understand what that something is. Having really clear labels for this is what I'm feeling and this is why I'm feeling it it's really helpful. I think if I don't know how to label it, then it gets really confusing. It gets hard to know then what to do about it or what to do with it. It's hard to know how to talk to the community around me about it. And I think leaning into community and the strength of community is really helpful. Like to find people who are willing to hold the hard with you and to hold the thing that feels big and stormy, whatever it is. Recently, and by recently I mean like 2 days ago, a very dear friend of ours had a friend of hers died in a car accident, like tragically. And like I don't know this person who passed away, but I do know my friend Liz. And so like as Liz is trying to figure out what to do and how to keep moving on without her friend, she's like sad and she's grieving and there's so much heaviness for her. And she's like been at our house. She's vaccinated and so are we. So she's been at our house and she just sits on our couch and cries and like cuddles her dog and watches silly TV shows. But like she doesn't have to figure out the rainbow part of this. She's still trying to figure out all of the things that she's feeling, but she's doing that in community of people who can be with her. And when she's ready to talk to us, we talk to her about like, okay, so what is it that you're feeling right now? What are you processing right now? And we can like be with her in that. And I think that helps to be like, to like fully embrace the storminess and like the grief, the trauma, the anxiety, like whatever it is that you're figuring out that you're feeling, like as you fully embrace it and fully understand it, then you can start to be like, okay, now that I understand what this big true thing is that I'm feeling, I can also look around for some of the other true things that are existing at the same time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that speaks a lot to like, it's okay not to be okay. Like we don't, life is hard and like it is hard and it's okay to accept that. It's not anyone's fault when hard things happen. And I think another piece that I think a lot of people have realized over the last year is like our mental health is just as, if not more important than our physical health. And so more people are coming into the idea that like having a therapist or talking to a therapist is like really important. But that's still something that's really hard, especially for what I've been told, like especially for young men or people where that's not something that their family has embraced before. Do you have any advice for teenagers that maybe aren't sure about that, or they're sure but their family's not sure?
I think the first thing I would say is that therapy is the probably the best thing that I've ever experienced as far as like a healing journey has gone. We spent, and I didn't figure that out until I was in my mid to late 20s. And so we spent a good couple years visiting a therapist all the time. And when it was just like the best thing on the planet, just to have a person to sit and listen to all of those things who isn't emotionally invested in my story in the same way that like my group of friends is. So my first, if you're like on the fence about therapy, or you're like, I'm all aboard, like whichever, I'm going to say yes, it is the greatest gift on the planet that people study to help us process our stuff. And I think it was really challenging for me when I was in high school, and even when I was younger, than to know how to proceed with that, because it wasn't a thing that was modeled for me. All the men, there's this joke about the men in my family that they don't talk about anything ever. They never share their emotions, and I had to learn what to do with my emotions. And so I think finding mentors and models to talk to, finding friends that could help me start to figure this processing out. I would say my advice would be whatever the most comfortable thing you could do, however small it is, like make yourself do that over and over and over again, right? If it's writing down like a journal entry about, this is how I'm feeling today, like you're processing your feelings externally, right? That's like a practice step towards being able to talk to somebody else about it. Even if it's like writing one sentence, whatever that thing is that allows you to do it, practice it over and over again. Because I think that without the practice, it stays hard for forever. I'm also an athlete. Like I played football and ran track and basketball, and like that idea that if I want to be good at something, I have to practice repeatedly until it becomes second nature. Like that's true in the classroom, it's true on a sports field, and it's certainly true of a lot of our like mental processing, like practicing to doing that in ways that are helpful and healthy and external. Like you will get good at what you practice. And so find a way to practice that external process, and preferably in community. And if you're not like there yet, if you're not ready to practice in community, even practicing by yourself is still a step towards that communal sharing of thought.
Yeah, that's phrased so well. I want to dig more into the poetry in a minute, but I'm curious, like as somebody who works with young people in a different setting than schools, do you notice anything about like young people in Portland in 2021 that might help people feel less alone, or just things that you think are important to note?
Yeah.
Because something I hear, and I ask that because I hear a lot of teenagers, and I'm sure you do too, they feel like their experience, if it's hard, it's harder than everyone else's. And if everyone feels that way, everyone feels like everyone else is fine, and it gets kind of tricky and isolating. So what do you notice about teenagers these days?
Yeah, I noticed that that not everyone is fine. And I think that that's true about adults too. And honestly, that's probably one of the places that it is least helpful to examine. Like young people, as you look up and examine adults, you're like, oh, this is what it is to be mature and grown. It is to have all your ducks in a row, and to not struggle, and to not worry, and to not whatever. And just about every adult you know is struggling in some similar ways. And I think the adults, to a lot of their credit, have learned some really healthy ways of dealing with our insecurities and our anxieties and our worries. So that's cool. And some of us have less healthy ways. Like there are not healthy things that I do. So like saying that to be mature is to have it all together. Young people sometimes do that, and that's not always true. So I just like, I feel like a lot of young people I'm hopeful that they're recognizing all of the things that are wrong in the world, like the big things that are wrong in the world, and wanting to do something about that. And I think that young people are in my experience, are increasingly willing to share like true heart things, and they're willing to listen to others as they process through those heart things. And so when we're feeling like everything isn't fine, but everyone else is okay, that's not the truth. And kind of leaning into what is true, that things aren't okay, and that people are perfectly willing to meet you in the stickiness. I'm hopeful that young people are starting to realize that a little bit more.
Yeah. I talked to somebody recently who was having a really hard day. And we talked about how like the last week and a half had been great, but this day was terrible. And I think sometimes it can be tricky to realize that I had 9 great days and 1 bad day. So then the 11th day, who knows how it'll go, but like those 9 days are still really great days, and they will, the tides turn, like the roller coaster goes up and down. Hard to get out of that tunnel vision sometimes. So you mentioned a little bit about like how writing has kind of been a tool for you, and also a tool that you like to tell others how they can use. So tell us more.
I started writing when I was, I want to say 12 or 13. My dad gave me a journal for my birthday, and since then I was like, oh yeah, okay, writing. I can like put down all of the things that I think, and it's kind of embarrassing looking at old journals, but I couldn't figure out, like I didn't know how to talk to people about what I was thinking and feeling, but I also knew that it had to go somewhere. And so writing became kind of the tool to do that. And recently, just kind of, I mean, as I knew that I loved to do it, I went to school, and English was my favorite subject in high school. I studied English in college, and just kind of as like becoming an adult and trying to wrestle through learning how to continue to grow in my expressing my feelings. I found poetry somewhere, and it just like spoke to me, right? It made my little heart come alive, and I was like, that's the way I can formulate my thoughts, and that's the way I can share what I feel. And so I just really embraced it. And some of what I think to be my best work, the work I'm the most proud of, is when I'm feeling the most intense things, and I just know that it has to go somewhere. And I think it's that process of naming what's really hard and what's really ugly, and trying to turn it into something beautiful. A poet who I really love and respect and look up to has this saying, "Fight evil with poetry." And that is like, I think that's what poetry does. It fights evil. Like there are some really ugly things that happen, and when I'm able to process through that and create something beautiful, even if it doesn't have a nice little rainbow ending to it, I still took something that was really ugly and made a piece of art with it. And that really helps me to kind of process and move through all of what comes my way. And sometimes I do write really joyful poetry because I'm feeling intensely joyful, and sometimes it's really like gnarly and unrefined, but it's a way to like start the process of moving through life for me.
What's the difference for you between journaling and writing poetry?
Barely any, honestly. I think there are some things that I write that I know are only for me, and that is going to be mostly what I would consider to be a journal. Like, and sometimes even a journal entry, it turns itself into a poem because it's a format that I know and I'm used to writing. But really the only difference I think between a journal entry and a poem is who the intended audience is. If I'm going to write something for me, it's a journal, and if I'm eventually going to like take something and polish it, and even if I don't polish it, if something is going to be presented to someone else or anyone else, it's kind of more in that like art and poetry category. And again, that's not to say that what I write for myself isn't art. but the audience matters a little bit.
Yeah, so we've talked to a couple different writers, and everybody has their own process, and every process is different. It seems like based on what needs to get out of your mind and into the world. But do you have any kind of specific things that are your habits or routines for writing or creating?
A few. I think if I'm going to, sometimes I'll sit down and be like, hey, I am going to write now. And that I think requires me to kind of set the table, like metaphorically. Usually I like some music or like something cool to look at. Like I write on my back deck a lot and I enjoy looking at the nature stuff in my yard. Often like a candle or the right light or just the right whatever, like my tasty little beverage or snack, like right there, I can like create an atmosphere for myself to be creative. But also, if there are times where I'm just like, I have to write. Like it doesn't matter what's going on around me. What I'm thinking about or feeling it just needs to be out of me in the form of writing, and that is significantly less structured. I do have my favorite pens and my favorite journal that I carry with me, but like that's it.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's kind of like, is the intention to create, or is the intention for you to kind of do some like self-therapy, for lack of a better phrase? Yeah. Cool. What kind of pen is your favorite type of pen?
Man, even
I won't know specific pens. I just, do you prefer clicky pens? Or?
No. It's actually a Sharpie pen. The little like these writing pens that it's kind of similar to a Sharpie pen. It's actually a different brand and I can't remember what it is, but they're my very favorite.
Yeah, but once you know, it's kind of like your tool, your little like magic tool or something. Yeah.
A magic tool. It's kind of what it is. Yeah.
I think when I talk to people who are creative, it's like once you have your thing, even if it's not about the pen, it gets you in that mindset that reminds you that like, I am a poet, I am an artist, I have things to share. Which, speaking of that, like, have you had a time in your life when you felt like a creative drought? And if so, like, what did you do to kind of bring back your spark?
Creative drought. Yeah, so the time after I left college, and then that time I was just like working, and these cycles come where I'm working far too hard. I had a job that was like, I was working all hours and I just was tired about 100% of the time. And so I just like, I didn't have any brain space to write. And then the other time was I had around the time that I was in therapy, I was in a really deep depression, and that was really hard to create then as well. And so like the things that are helpful to me are, I feel like I don't try to force myself very often. I'm just like back to that, like how to embrace joy, just naming the season. It's like, oh, this is a season in which I'm exceedingly tired, or this is a season where my emotions are not putting me in a space to like be creative. And so I'm like, okay, well, it will come back eventually. And I think paying attention to my internal cues. And there have been times too where I'm like, I don't know that. I think it's usually on the tail ends of those times where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get back into this. So I'm going to sign myself up to be in a situation where I have to create, whether that's taking a class. I have friends who put on like writing seminars, and so I'll just like sign up to go to their little writing workshops. A time for me that's actually really helpful is National Poetry Month, which is April. And so a friend of mine started like a poem a day challenge in National Poetry Month. And I was like, oh, I haven't written in a while. I'm going to sign up for that because it's going to be fun. And so like I have to create because there's a community of people who are going to see what I do. And even if it is a crappy first draft, just being willing to share it, it helps to be like, oh, look, I wrote a thing and people read it. And there's a community of people who are encouraging me and cheering me on, that usually helps.
Cool. Did you write, was that this April? That right?
I did not do it this April. This April I was working on this other poetry project I've just recently completed. And so, but like the 3 Aprils in a row before this one, I've done that. And I also learned that there's like Reddit groups that are just or what are they, subreddits that are just like poetry prompts. And you can find like Twitter accounts, like you can literally just Google prompts for anything and you will find like prompts, if that is like a helpful way if I'm in a place where I'm like, I don't know what I want to write about. So let me Google a prompt. I also have a friend who she is also a poet. And so sometimes we'll text each other back and forth. I'm just like, hey, I want to write a poem. What should I write about? And so she'll send me a prompt or I'll send her something. I think I will say one other creative inspiration for me is paying attention to the news, which is weird, but I'm like, when news things are going on, I often will write about how that impacts me or what I feel about that, whether it's like great news or terrible news or whatever. So like just paying attention to the world usually can often get me writing.
Yeah, and just to not put it lightly, but there's been a couple opportunities for that in the last year. We've had a lot of things happen. Has there been anything that you've written in the last year that you feel like was both therapeutic for you and like a creative gift to the world?
Yeah. So the church I work at was, it's down by Benson High School and right up the street from Revolution Hall. And during one of the protests this summer, somebody tagged the side of our wall with, it says Black Lives Matter. And it was like, we came into work the next day and there's like this big Black Lives Matter on our wall, and you're faced with this choice to like paint over it because it's technically graffiti, or like what? You know what I mean? Like painting over it communicates something. And so even before I had the idea, somebody else had the idea. We turned it into a mural. And my friend Heidi is a phenomenal artist. So she kind of oversaw the creation of a mural. She invited each of us to participate. And then in response to the tagging in the mural, I wrote a poem about that, which was a really fun experience to just be like, okay, this is kind of our thought process as we see what's happening. Like, how does this person feel that like, I'm so frustrated that my best move is to spray paint a church? And how does a church respond to that in a way that really reflects what's true and what's good? And I'm a little bit proud of that work, not because like I wrote it, but because it really reflects the good in a community that I'm really proud of.
Cool. If we wanted to read that, where might we find it?
If you wanted to read that, you could, like, I just published a book. It's in there.
Oh, cool.
But even better, since, nobody wants to buy a book from me, it's online. Like, I think I could find a YouTube link for it. And so you could just watch me perform it, because that's like way cooler anyway.
Mm-hmm. That's a live performance then. Live as you, however that works.
Yeah.
Do you have people or mentors that inspire you in general?
I do. I have so many. Thank you for that question. I think, so I made reference to the guy who wrote Fight Evil with Poetry. His name is Micah Bournay, and I really love Micah Bournay's work. There are a bunch of rappers that I really love, and the way that they approach creativity and positivity just really inspire me. Chance the Rapper, Toby Nguigwe. And then I like some dead people too, like James Baldwin, and Langston Hughes is one of my favorites. Tupac was a phenomenal poet. in addition to being a pretty okay rapper. I like that smile. I'm just kidding. He was a great rapper. So yeah. So like in the poetry art world, those folks, I think there are plenty of athletes that I really admire. Colin Kaepernick has been one of my favorite. Like I was a 49er fan when I was little, and so watching the way that he used his position to speak on something that mattered to him was really cool. Same with LeBron. I actually despise every team LeBron James has ever played for, but I do love the way he kind of marshals his influence to be a leader, and that's inspirational to me.
Thinking of stories in general, films and movies can be a great way to also kind of express things. Do you have any favorite movies that are either important to you or you feel like are great inspirations?
Yeah. Moana is like one of my favorites because, like I said, I have 4 children in our home. And so we just like, I remember watching Moana and being like, man, not only is this girl like hardcore awesome and really like following what she knows to be true, I think that it inspires trickster people to like, oh yeah, causes are cool. Like that, I mean, I just really love that. And I love the cultural representation that it is as well. That, what other movies? I feel like I'm gonna have a hard time finding not kids movies that are inspirational.
Kids movies are great. I have half of my outfit is Inside Out. So
yeah, Inside Out is pretty great. So we really love Soul and the Star Wars movies because it is Star Wars Day.
Yeah, I think kids movies let us explore ourselves as adults. Like we think of Inside Out. We all have marbles in our heads. We all have these things that show up.
True.
So.
Yeah, and Black Panther's pretty dope too. I really like that one.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah, great movie. What about movie directors? Do you have any movie directors? I'm asking because we have some movie buffs in our group, and so
yeah,
like this.
Movie directors. I mean, I don't know directors like that. I'm trying to rack my brain. The only directors that I even could name off the top of my head are Ava DuVernay, and I like a lot of the stuff that she's done. I really love Kenya Barris, and he's like a TV guy, but his like Blackish is hilarious and like spot on, at least in my experience of being a Black boy. So yeah, those are the only 2 directors I know, but I love their work.
Yeah. I want to make sure if anyone else who's here has questions, go ahead and make sure that you type them in the chat if you want, or we're at a point where like, if you want to unmute yourself, if you have a question, feel free to go ahead and do so. I also have more but I want to make sure the space works for those who came to it. And while people are thinking, if you were able to give teenagers coming back to school in the fall a piece of advice or 2, what might you say to them?
I would give everybody coming back to school in the fall this advice. Like, we have just gone through this process of like stopping everything that we knew the way that it was going, and now we get to reinvent everything. I think that for students, there's a chance to reinvent how you engage with your school community, how you engage with your classroom, how you engage with your teachers. For all of my teacher friends, it's a chance to reinvent how we do classroom education. And I feel like that process of reinventing is like the opportunity that exists for that is a once in a lifetime thing. Like every single person had to shut down, and we get to reevaluate, was this working? Who do I want to be from here on out? And we get to make moves to be that new person. So that's like the first thing. And I think the other would be really to push into community. The the myth that we're all by ourselves and that like we're the sole determiner of what happens to us and who we become is like that needs to be over, right? We just spent a year and a year plus separated from like close proximal contact to community for a lot of us. And I know for me, I miss that a lot. And so I will be leaning heavy into being with people in all the phases of life after this. And yeah, so like leaning into community feels really important because that I will never take that for granted ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you think back to yourself in high school, what can you share about a time that was super meaningful or impactful to you that maybe the other person or whatever the situation is might not have realized how important it was for you, but it shaped you?
Okay, I can think of like so many of these. The one that first comes to mind is my football coach was a really cool dude. And one summer, like we would do 7-on-7 and kind of drills during summer sometimes. And one time he invited me to his house to help him paint, I think he was doing. And so I was there and we were painting and he was going to pay me because, you know, everyone loves to get paid for summer jobs. And in the middle of our painting, his daughter was like, "Dad, I made tea for you and Maurice." And so like he was like, "Okay, we're gonna stop and we're gonna go to tea with my daughter." And I thought that like he was just doing life, and it was really incredible to me that he would stop the important work of painting his house to enjoy a few minutes sipping like overly watery lemonade with his daughter and having like these little cookie snacks at this tiny little fake table with her and her dolls. And that was really meaningful to me as like this is what it could be like to be a dad. My dad was not that, and so to have someone else who I respected for a whole bunch of different reasons be sensitive and caring in that way was really inspirational.
That's cool.
And I think too, one other person that was like really influential was this guy by the name of Eric Knox. And he's still around in Portland doing great things at the Holla Foundation. He was my youth pastor person when I was in high school. I think watching him do really similar things, watching him as a husband and a father, watching him be really like unapologetic about who he was as a Black man and an athlete and all of this was really like transformative to me because like I was not secure in who I was. And so learning that it was okay to be all of who I was and to be created to be this way, like I can be comfortable and bold about like, okay, this is who I am and all the different facets of my life. That was cool. It was really cool to me to see.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about yourself?
Sheesh. My favorite thing about myself, my beautiful hair and my very loud laugh.
Cool. Yeah, I have never asked anyone that question in the group, but I feel like it's important that we like, as we move into a phase where we're like, yo, you need to be yourself. Like we need to love ourselves and embrace that.
Wow.
And especially in the world, like men aren't really taught to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't teach that in a lot of settings. And so, yeah, learning to feel emotions, like yourself, and be proud of those things.
Yeah. I think one other thing I would add to that about just like liking myself, I've really loved the different juxtapositions that aren't really that. So like, I remember one time I was coaching football and we were driving out to a football game, and on the way I was reading a book of poetry, and I was like, this is like the most bonkers thing. Like, how many football coaches are like reading poetry on their way to a game? Like, so I just really like that there are so many different things that I am, but they all exist together. They don't have to be opposites. So I dig that.
Yeah, we're all a lot of puzzle pieces. So, and sometimes you see a piece and you have no idea where it fits, but like it fits somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone who's here have any questions that you want to type or unmute yourself and ask? Do you have any life lessons that are important to you that you can share? And then second question will come from Stephanie. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah. What's your favorite food?
Oh, dang. Okay.
Bonus points if you weave those two together somehow.
I know.
There's no points. There's no grades. This isn't a real class.
I know.
Don't worry.
Do I have any life lessons that are important to me that I can share? I think probably the two things. One I've alluded to is just the like learning to process the mental and emotional things that are happening that's probably one of the most important skills that you can develop as a young person, as a human being. I think there's so much that goes on, and learning how to process it, learning how to like dig into the feelings and the emotions, and to be, I mean, I feel like I keep saying being in community, but just like learning how to unpack and process through all the different things that happen to us in community is really important for us and for the people around us. And I think that another really huge lesson is that making mistakes is not definitive. Like I'm way bigger than the worst thing I've ever done. I'm way bigger than the worst mistake I ever made. And I've made some pretty terrible ones. And I think that I get to get back up, and I get to put everything back together in new and creative and pretty great ways. And so like, I don't have to be defined by the worst thing. Yeah. I'm sure I know other life lessons, but those are the two that come to mind most readily. And then my favorite food is tricky because I like food, like period. My wife is an amazing cooker, and so I like a lot of what she makes. I really, really love a perfectly made steak on the barbecue. I really like salmon, and I really like vegetables, and also cake.
What kind of cake?
And ice cream. All of the kinds of cake. I really
like
love
buffets.
To bake.
I feel like you might love buffets, like because you can get
no,
all these.
But you know what?
You don't get good options of all these.
Yeah. I actually don't love buffets. They have like a little soft spot in my heart because I remember going with my grandma and her big buffet purse, but they're not my favorite.
All grandmas have those.
I know. I feel like I would rather have just like one well-crafted meal that's like, even if it's like one thing or like a couple things, than like a little bit of everything. So honestly, like I love a lot of food, and it is also really about the company, like who I'm sitting with and who I'm eating with matters.
I'm thinking of company. We talked to somebody about like, you started a lot about community, and one thing that teenagers go through is like there's healthy community and there's unhealthy community. And like it can be really challenging if you realize one day, hey, all these people don't have my best interest in mind, to recreate that. What advice would you give to somebody who has had that moment of like, maybe these friends aren't the best influence, but I care about them. They've known me since kindergarten, but I know that I need to surround myself with people that are making different choices. Like how would you advise them to?
Yeah, I think that I feel this, that there is a temptation to be like, when I have that realization, to be like, okay, well, I'm going to be the person who changes it. Like, I'm going to stay in this relationship and be different and model something different. And like, I'm going to be the positive one. And that is like super great and super noble and admirable. And I think it's really tricky. Just like I was saying about coming back, we get to reinvent and recreate who we are. It's really challenging to recreate who you are while staying in the exact same environment. And so I think once I have that realization that I need to not be with these people, then I need to start making, like, I don't mean this to be really prescriptive because maybe it's different for you and your situation, but I think to start making different choices in some level, like, okay, I know that I need some different kinds of input. So where can I get that? And maybe it's like, okay, I'm never talking to these people again for like a bunch of months until I figure out how to be different. And maybe it's more gradual than that, where it's like, okay, like I can't just ditch all these people that I care about. So instead of like walking to lunch with them every day, I'm going to go hang out with so-and-so once a week, or I'm going to go hang out with so-and-so a couple times in a different capacity. Like whatever mentally positive person you can start building into your circle, and like transitioning away from something unhealthy, like do that. Because there are plenty of people who are good and healthy, and plenty of communities that are good and healthy for you, that line up with interests you have, whether that's like this club or that club, or even just a teacher or mentoring person where you're like, all right, I'm going to go hang out with an adult for a little bit because they are pretty rad and can, like, it's a good excuse to not be with like a ragamuffin group. Like, oh, sorry, I have to go to this like mentorship thing. My bad. I'll miss you. I'll catch you next time. Like, whatever it is, like, find the positive and start moving that way.
Yeah, I've told a lot of people, like, if people ever need an excuse to make a better choice, like, they can blame me. That's 100% fine, because I've done high school. Then I don't know everybody. Like, just say you got to go to Miss Kim's office, and they can be mad at me. It's fine. So we'll wrap up here in a little bit, but let's see. I think, did you have a favorite teacher in high school, or not necessarily teacher, but person that was at your high school? Because I think it's important to distinguish, because sometimes it is favorite teachers, but having worked across several schools, everyone in the building is there because they value young people being the best of themselves, hopefully.
Yeah. So. My very favorite teacher, had a few people in my school that I really appreciated. My football coach, his name is Andrew Jansen. He also taught economics and something else. So I dug him. I think there was this teacher, Miss Caffel. She taught home ec, and she was super lovely. That was probably one of my favorite classes. I made myself a cute little tie. And then Mrs. Jarvis was one of the school secretaries, and she had a daughter in my grade, and I really liked her, and we would always check in with her at the front desk area. She was always the person who gave you your tardy slips. And so, because that was our system. And so I would always like talk to her on my way in, even if I wasn't tardy, because she was my friend's mom, and we would like make little jokes, and it was cool.
Yeah, it's all about those little relationships. Like, I think, yeah, which is tricky these days with, like, just smiling at someone looks different when we can't see each other's smiles right now. But, you know, we find ways to connect differently.
You know what's really fascinating about that? So we have a 21-year-old daughter living in our home, and she has a baby who is almost a year old. And so her whole life has been like masks, right? But even she will respond to somebody's eyes who's smiling at her. Like, she can tell in the eyes that someone's smiling. So it's like, and cool. That's the other thing. Like, I'm like an extrovert, and I want everyone to know, like, oh, I like you. I want to engage with you. I want to talk to you. So I'm always smiling, and I like hold on to that. I'm like, okay, cool. Even if they can't see my mouth, like there can be something in my eyes that tells somebody I'm smiling at you. Like, we have a little moment.
Yeah, authenticity isn't necessarily just a smile. And I think I find it really encouraging, and also challenging in a good way, that, like, in my opinion, like young people, especially teenagers, like they can tell when adults are being real or not. And so I think young people are really inspiring because they've been through a lot. Like many people in high school were born into a world that's always had a lot of barriers. And every year there's a big thing that makes it seem like the world is scary. So yeah, it's okay not to be okay, and resilience is a thing. But it's also okay to, know that you're in the storm. I like that analogy. Does anyone else have anything that they are curious about or would want more information on? Or I like the food questions. We already know your Starbucks drink. We know your favorite food.
And then I just put that poem link. I found it for y'all. So there it is. Cool. Thank you. I'll make sure to share that with everybody who's not here too. So it'll be in there. Let's see. I think I have one more super fun. Oh, what's your favorite thing about Portland? Or favorite place to go in Portland that inspires you? My very favorite place to go. That's super easy. Powell's. Like I love Powell's. It's like the best bookstore on the planet. I think the day before my wedding, my wife and I went there, like hung out for like 3 hours, and spent like $80, which was money we did not have, but we read. That's a reasonable way to get out of Powell's. My very favorite thing about Portland, honestly, is the weather. I like that we have really distinct seasons. We have 3 of them anyway. Like spring, summer, and fall, and I like all 3 of those seasons for their various reasons. So I really dig that about Portland, and then like the access we have to do stuff outside during each of those seasons is pretty cool too. Oh, what's that? What's your favorite thing to explore with your kids in Portland? With my kids, we love to go to parks. My youngest is like really into skateboarding, and so going to places that have skate parks and watching him he's like, I almost said he's 5, he's not, he's 7. But watching him try to hang with like people who've been skating for forever and just his tenacity, it's really fun to watch. But the other ones are into that as well. So just kind of watching them explore different parks, and it was rad. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for taking time to be with us today. Yeah. I'm going to click stop on the recording, and